But how girls survive in America?
What advice would you give to those who are just planning to move?
And I actually watched it in English with English subtitles.
Well, I sat down. I was really scared to speak.
I tried to learn English, but I didn't succeed.
So what did you tell yourself?
I'm currently going through stage where I'm learning to delegate.
You tell yourself, like in the mirror, what you say.
I understand.
And many get stuck because of this.
I didn't know anything at all. I tried to pull them into the kitchen.
And soon there will be no credit.
And ask yourself, right question, and why, but how can I make this work? And family. So when I arrived in America Hello, Ira. Welcome to Vlad Karinko's podcast. We're here talking about immigrants who have arrived and the questions they have. You arrived and you're a girl. Girls have a lot of questions, but how girls survive in America? What is it like to be a mom with a child in America and survive here? It's very difficult. So I'll try to answer your questions. It might be a bit harder for me to answer the questions because I'm a man and I've lived a man's life. Women's questions will probably be a bit different. Although we are all immigrants, we are all the same. We buy the same bread, the same milk, and the same gasoline in our cars, and other necessary daily items that we use regularly.
I will probably ask questions that relate more to the people, to the local communities and their unique stories, experiences, perspectives, contributions, and cultural impacts, let's say. Not just those that concern women's issues. From your previous podcast with interviews, you mentioned that these were your personal questions. When you are forced to move to a new place, the experience is quite different, bringing unique challenges and emotions that you wouldn't face otherwise. What advice would you give to those who are just planning to move?
Everyone says the same thing, learn English. But in reality, for me, it's impossible to learn English. I really tried to learn English in school, but I just couldn't do it. And just so you understand, I moved to America. The verb do, means to do. What does do mean? I didn't know what do meant. Do you? What are those letters are you talking about? Well, actually, I had zero English. So English is very important. If you don't have English, you go...
I apologize. We need to insert a bet here. The English we learned in our school, I only understand it from our school. And when you came here, you realized that it doesn't work out and there's more English here.
An English school is just an English school. So there are movies now I would highly recommend before moving. That's what helped me watch. I took the series Friends and I watched it in English with English subtitles. Why? Because when I watched in English with Russian or Ukrainian subtitles, I was just reading and I didn't hear anything. Watching without subtitles, I got nothing. I caught some words. Zero, absolutely nothing. At least I could catch a word here and there. Do you know how hard it is? They all laugh, they're telling something interesting, and you don't understand, and you watch your head. It really hurts from this. And it seems like, what is that? But by the 5th season, I had already started to understand what they were talking about. At first I understood some phrases, 1 or 2 phrases. Then I started to understand some sentences. And then I was even able to understand what they were talking about in the 5th season. So, it's a constant. I tried to watch some action movies where a lot is happening. But there, they shoot, run around, scream. You don't understand. So you all need to watch something where people speak regular American English. And to listen, to this day, don't know a single rule in English. I don't know any rules in English. I simply learned it purely by just listening. I didn't go to college and I didn't go to university. I didn't study. Now phones help when you type. They correct you. And thanks to that, I just learned English by listening as it comes. There was a very brief and fleeting moment when a contractor, 3 or 4 years in America, 3 probably, the contractor is saying something to me in English. I understand what he is saying. I answer him in English. But if you ask me to translate what he asked me, I couldn't. I just took it in and responded like a child purely by ear. I understood that he understood me correctly. I understand that he understood me correctly. I realized I needed to do, but if I were to translate it word for word, I wouldn't know how to translate them. I go ear.
I understood. And if we're not talking about languages? Well, you got into more of a language issue, so I'll ask another. My next question. In Ukraine, I worked at an educational institution, and as strange as it may sound now, I taught economics and English, which I don't know about history. As it turned out, when I arrived in San Diego, indeed, most of my students, when they started to speak, the first thing was that many of our people can't start communicating because of the fear of speaking. And that was one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest problems. And even when I was teaching at the educational institution, all my students were afraid to speak. Even there in Ukraine, they were afraid to speak English. How do you get over this barrier and take the first step? I gave such advice. You stand in front of the mirror and just talk. Or every day, whatever you do at home, you walk around and talk to yourself to somehow overcome that language barrier to speak. So I came to America by myself. And I remember my first interview and I was like, well, I sat down. I was really scared to start speaking, to take the first step and overcome the barrier.
Well, you know, it's difficult for me to talk to a person at level 10 when I'm at level 0.
I understand what you're saying, nonetheless.
So why not just go and talk?
Well, most people can't do it. They have fear. So I have a friend who says I went to the store and by the time I came out, my shirt was soaked while she just inserted her card into the ATM at the checkout, and that was it. And many people get stuck because of this.
I understand, but when I started my business, my English was just put toilet and put faucet.
You said that it needs to be fixed somewhere. What started our story?
That's what I knew in English. I didn't know anything at all. I tried to pull them into the kitchen so they could point it out to me. So my issue wasn't about speaking. My issue was about understanding. And I explained as best as I could, with my fingers and words. I think it's a psychological barrier that needs to be overcome. Here's how to overcome it. But that's a question for a psychologist.
No, not about psychology. I understand what you're talking about. I gave this task. Andinya, if you can't start speaking, talk to yourself in the mirror about what you're saying. Because in most cases, the person sitting across from you doesn't care what you're saying. And it doesn't matter what language you're speaking. You just feel more ashamed of yourself about what you're talking about. That was my option. I remember when I got my first job and a client came up to me and said that, could you help me please to find, and she starts to explain that she can't. I'm like, so just say whatever you want. Find, not find. I still don't understand anything. Now you're going to point it out to me, and that's how our highly intellectual English conversation will end. I agree with you that this is the biggest psychological problem. There are still some options. Nothing. You mean just start speaking, right?
Just start. Go into communication. Go to an American church. You're not there for work. Go to an American church. There are a lot of churches here. People are open. People are ready to communicate. Go to an American church. There are home groups. American churches where people, families gather, chat, and spend an hour or two just talking about questions. This is not work. That's irresponsibility. People are there to help you. They understand that you speak poorly and they will suggest, show, and guide you. So go to a community where you'll be welcomed with open arms, where you can communicate, where you can talk for hours. And if they don't understand you, you shouldn't care because it's not work. You're not applying for a job. It's just communication. And people will be happy to talk with you.
Okay, good. What were the biggest challenges you faced in the first few months after moving? So you just moved and what to do?
Go to their house. You can indeed go anywhere.
No, but what was the hardest thing to overcome and you had no one to ask for advice?
Well, my situation is a bit different from others because, my wife had lived in America for 10 years before this, and her first language was English. Russian was the second, and Ukrainian was the third. So it was easier for me to ask some questions. I could just call. And my wife will explain what's going on. Any questions? So at this stage, it was a bit easier for me actually to go through all these stages. I didn't know any English at all. My wife did, and she answered those questions. And, well, the hardest thing I remember from my first days was related to the language. I was driving and I saw people standing on the street, young people, asking for money. Such, English. Why aren't you working? I don't know English, I don't understand. And I was able to find a job without knowing English, while you, knowing English, are standing on the street. For me, it was such a shock. But then I realized later that not knowing English is actually important. And why am I starting this podcast? One of the reasons, because not knowing or knowing the language lead to success or failure in business. Knowledge is the key factor, and it will come.
Knowledge expands connections. That allow you to develop faster.
But your mind, your thinking, your perspective on the situation, your decisions about where you're going and how you're developing, because this podcast will not only be about business, but also about work. Because business is not for everyone. People have arrived and they want to get on their feet in America. You can be an employee and earn more than in business. Work less, have less headache, and still make the same or even more money than someone who runs a business. But then you learn and grow. So there are two paths. So in America, you can learn and grow and build a career and earn good money without the headache. Because business is not about money. It's more about the headache.
That's how it is. How long did the adaptation take? Everyone says that as soon as you cross over and land on this continent, it takes 3 years. It takes 3 years for adaptation so that you feel more or less safe and at ease. Well, it's been 2 years for me. I remember when I arrived, I thought, well, it's just going to take half a year, you know, God, what weaklings. I mean, 3 years. A year and a half since I moved. I felt you no longer belong there. And here, you still don't belong either. You've unrooted yourself, but haven't grounded yourself anywhere yet. You're just hanging in the air. When you've unrooted yourself, but you haven't grounded yourself anywhere yet, and it's that state, when you're just hanging in the air. How do you not get stuck in that state and keep moving forward? That's the first question. And another question is, when will you feel that you actually belong somewhere? So somewhere, everyone says 3 years. Is that true? So after 3 years, does it get significantly better, significantly easier?
Well, in my personal life, I didn't see a return to Ukraine at all. And if I hadn't had success there, and I came to the country to build a successful business.
So close the past for yourself forever.
It was closed for me as soon as I left there. So I didn't see a return. I didn't have nostalgia. I didn't go through that landing phase. I had a phase probably when I started working for myself. And after 2 years, we came here and we had 20,000. After 2 years in America, I had nothing. And I was grateful to God that I had no debts. And I had already started my own business. And with each year, it was getting better and better for me. I was already running my own business. And I was working on it. It was very hard. It was hard. I thought that I would never be able to buy an apartment. Then, when I feel like I can buy an apartment, I think, why buy an apartment? A better house. You're saving for a house. And up to this point, there's still nothing. So, making timely decisions, understanding in time where you want to go, what you want. Understand where you see yourself in this country. I think when you understand yourself, who you are in this country, and you'll feel grounded. As long as you don't see yourself, how can you realize yourself? You can't feel grounded. Because I was born and lived in Ukraine, but I couldn't realize myself for 10 years. And I probably wasn't grounded there and didn't need to uproot myself. I didn't feel successful there. I had done anything or achieved any results. But when I came here and started my journey from scratch and started a business, it gradually started to come together. I was just working, as there wasn't even time to think about grounding.
The most common question people who have come from Ukraine are asking now is about legalization. So first, is it a myth or reality? Myth or reality? What I encountered when I arrived was that I was told that I could not take any benefits, social assistance, etc., because it would not give us the opportunity to obtain citizenship in the future. Is it true or a myth?
Yes. When I initially came to America on a tourist visa and originally applied for asylum, fortunately, no benefits whatsoever were available to me at that time in the United States. So I didn't use any American benefits. I know that people talk about this. This started being talked about during Trump's first term, and now he's in his second term. I think it's okay if you take some government assistance for a year or two to get back on your feet. That's normal. After 2 years, when you can do things on your own, it's great. I know one family that's a great example. They are already of age they came in, 90s, immigrants. And they say that after the first 2 years, when we gave up American benefits, we celebrated that. That we can already live without benefits. Because there are actually people who live in America on benefits their whole lives. In fact, you are closing off opportunities in your life with these benefits. Development. And people who come to America without benefits achieve more than those who arrived and received government assistance. You need to eat, feed family. You achieve better results. Because you have a different motivation. You need to eat, you need to feed your family. And thanks to this motivation, which is not voluntary, you achieve better results. For example, those who moved to America from Ukraine and won the green card, 90% achieve much less than those who came here and have already legalized themselves in America. They came without documents, without a work permit. They came without government benefits. They achieved much greater results in America.
That's what you're talking about. They wanted, you know, you were given a gift. It's just a gift for you. But when you earn 100,000 and buy it for yourself, you really feel that this gift is worth 100,000 because you feel every dollar. That's cool. Credit is coming soon. The main headache for every person, how to quickly and effectively build it up.
Look, credit score, what's important? Open a lot of credit cards at once.
A lot. How much is that?
Up to 10 is recommended. I don't know. I don't have that many overall this time.
I'm not here either. And there's no credit coming soon.
Credit cards are a must. The mistake is not to use more than 10%. They give you a credit card. It seems like such nonsense. What's the point of this? Because they give you a $300 credit card and you can't spend more than $30. What's the point? But that's how it works.
And then credit style builds up quickly.
There's a story, there's a story, there's a story. You might have a credit score of 750, 760. Oh, but you haven't taken any loans and it's empty. And they won't give you anything. Do you understand? Therefore, the weight of your credit score is important. What you have already borrowed and what you have paid off. So, getting a car on credit or getting a phone on credit and paying it off. You can get a phone on credit and pay it off faster. And that adds to your credit score.
Cool. This really needs to be noted because before, everyone said that if you have a credit score of 716, 720, you can buy whatever you want. But I've never heard that it can be zero. You need to do something.
You might have a credit score of 740, 745, but if there's weight and everything is paid off, they'll give you 10 times more. That's why they look at the weight. They look at how many times you've taken credit, how much you've paid back, and how much you've settled. So, there's a big complex there. I'm not a credit history specialist. Be very careful. Because there are cards. I had this experience when I opened an online card. Some card, I didn't use it. I opened it because I had to, and they were charging me money. I didn't constantly use it for incentives or services. I'm like, why are you filming everything? And I didn't pay once or twice. And my credit score, and they filed against me. The score was $30. It wasn't a problem at all to pay the $30, but they filed against me at the bureau, and my credit score dropped by 80 points. Very much.
Wow.
Very much. So you really need to be careful with credit cards and the number of loans. And the credit score is divided by age. Why open many credit cards? After 2 years, cards are 2 years old. Staggering openings lowers average age. In 2 years, these credit cards will be 2 years old. If you opened a credit card now, another one in a year, another in 5, and another in 7 years, all those years add up and are divided in the middle, giving you the average. If you just opened a credit card, credit department, it was 2 years, but it became 1 year because you just opened a credit card. He shared it with you half and half. And credit age matters a lot.
Wow, that's cool. This is very high quality information. Thank you. The most painful question of today is how moving has affected relationships with loved ones. Because many people in my circle who have moved, moving is a really tough blow. About 30% of married couples have divorced. I arrived alone with my child. I can talk about my relationship with my child. In the first year, I worked almost 220 hours every month. My child has been to the ocean twice. Now, as I said, I'm giving her what I owe. How does moving affect relationships and how can we keep them intact? If you, after 10 years, How many years do you have? 10, 12 and a half, 12 and a half years. You moved, you have 3 children, and you managed to do it. How did you do it?
It was hard. In a practical sense, practically speaking, indeed.
Besides it being very hard, practically, there is a reality. Everyone says it was really hard. When you're actively looking for time in your life to dedicate to your child, you're exhausted, taking it out on others, and need time for yourself amidst everything. Understand? And you need to find time for your own life, everything else in your life. Do you understand?
You know, we make enough of our own mistakes in life without repeating someone else's. So I can't give advice, because what works for one person doesn't work for another. I can only say that, first of all, my wife and I are believers, and for us the Bible is an authority. So when there are questions, it's like, okay, what does the Bible say about this? Is there some kind of neutral judge to whom you can turn so you don't have to point fingers at each other? So, okay, what does the Bible say about this question? It's really hard. When I work 10, 12, 14 hours a day, my wife with 2 kids answers the phones, makes appointments, and does everything else, and she's going a bit crazy because she has to lock herself in a room to talk to a client, and then there's someone knocking at the door like this. It was an incredibly arduous and challenging journey that tested my limits and resilience. However, in the year 2020, I made the life-changing decision to join the transformative program known as Rise Up King. It's a business club for Christian business owners. A person makes skylights, he's from California, and he has such a bold position. 4 pillars on which a family should stand. And I believe that this is irrelevant for every immigrant. It doesn't matter how you arrived or everything that's happening. 4 things. God, meaning the relationship with God, family, health, money. I understand that money is the hardest to come by when you arrive as an immigrant. And I understand that we spend the most time on this. But we have to find time for family. We just have to, when you're tired, instead of watching a movie or scrolling through YouTube or something else, watch. I had a problem where I would come home. I was tired all day, and I was like, I'm exhausted. I just want to watch the news, just scroll through and relax. And your wife is home all day with the kids and wants your attention, but you're sitting on your phone, I struggled with this. Okay, my problem is the phone. Everything, now when I get home, the phone doesn't exist for me, that's it. But it's a journey that you have to go through. Now when I get home, the phone doesn't exist for me, that's it. But it's a journey that you have to go through. There are things that need to be agreed upon, like, okay, I need to do this now, I can't do without it. I understand that this is a problem, but at this stage, I have to do it. We are all human, we must do this. But if we have habits that we do for ourselves, while considering our partner, if we only focus on what's better for ourselves, divorces and issues happen. They face tough times too. Because the person actually understands what we're going through. She's going through it too. She has tough times as well. But when you shut yourself off and do things just for yourself, not for others, then that's a problem. I found a lot of excuses. An excuse is a justification. I justified myself, why I was doing certain things. And it's really hard to look at yourself and see yourself from the outside. Well, it takes willpower. Yeah, but Rise Up King really helped me a lot. To look at yourself from a different perspective and ask yourself the right questions. Why? How can I reduce this? And family. How much am I giving to my family? And how can I do this more? Relationships with God. And how much time do I have for this? Is there really no time for this at all? Health. Am I actually digging my own grave while trying to make money? And what's the use of this money if there's no health? And I won't be needed by anyone. They did a very interesting exercise where they took all of us to a cemetery and said, find a grave of a person, look at it there, and try to put yourself in their shoes. And what do you think they say? Like, she passed away. What do they remember about her? What do they say about her? What did she leave behind? And when you're standing there looking at that person, he really doesn't matter at all. Well, you don't think about money at all. So you think about people, about the relationships you've built with them, what you've done, and what they say about you after you're gone. You stand there, and if I were to die right now, what would people say about me? What will my family say about me? What will my children say about me? Who are you? What have you done for this? So this aspect of family relationships is very complex. It's really hard to maintain during a move because everything is changing, and it's not just changing for you, it's changing for the other person as well. As men are more resilient and less emotional, we tend to internalize it. So women experience this more emotionally. And in reality, we need to be their support and help them. And we carry it all with us, close ourselves off, and go to the phone and something else. And we just spend that time instead of supporting our wives.
Okay, cool. What are you most grateful for about yourself? Since the moment you moved and made your way to today. So what are you ready to honestly say 3 thanks to yourself for? And what new character traits have you developed that helped you reach this point?
I would say thank you to myself for making the right decision and going to Rise of King. In 2020, there was a significant and pivotal moment when I looked deeply within myself. That is, where I was truly able to look at myself and my problems and what I was doing wrong. After that, my relationship with God changed in a way that was meaningful and profoundly impactful. So I'm thankful for having a real relationship with God because it impacts my entire life. And I would thank not myself but my wife for being patient with me for so long when I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. Even now, sometimes it happens, but yes, I would be very grateful to my wife for enduring me and everything that was connected to me since the beginning of our move, because we keep moving forward non-stop and we're pulling through, but we don't look back at what we still have, which is family behind us, and we need to take care of them and not forget about them. And we keep moving forward non-stop, but we don't look back at what we still have, which is family behind us. And we need to take care of them and not forget about them.
Cool. And if we go back to your character traits, what new character traits have you gained? Well, maybe resilience is more. Maybe you discovered something about yourself you had no idea about before, about myself. So how did you open up from a different side?
I guess other people would say it's hard to talk about this for myself, how I opened up. I realized that I can be successful in business because for 10 years before that, I wasn't successful. Did you start to respect yourself for that? Yes. My attitude towards myself has changed because something has happened. I can do something. But at the same time, I understand that what I've gone through, God has changed me. And I know that God has a very big plan for my life. And it's really great with a lot of things, I don't know what awaits me there. But I know that the path He is leading me on must be exactly the one that will allow me to be a person who can fulfill my whole life. Because business can't be bigger than its owner. So you have to grow and become better in order for the business to thrive.
What's this about? About strength, about resilience? For example, I never thought in my life. I lived in Ukraine. I lived really well. I came to California to assist with childbirth. I stayed for 2 years. It just happened by chance. I never thought in my life that I had such a resilient body and organism, that I could work 220 hours a year while having a little one. I'm not saying that I worked out for strength. I mean, we're not talking about that. But I had 2 jobs and I was working mentally quite a lot. Honestly, I thought I would give up. I felt weak. So I started running. It energized me. Kept running. At first, it seemed to me that when you have even less strength, it's because you're giving away energy. But then it just boosts you and starts to lift you up. And since then, started exercising and running. It's a skill that is built up. I asked about that. It's all about character. These are the traits of character that you've developed. And you look back and say, oh, that's cool. I didn't even think I had those.
That's a great idea. We need to think about it.
We need to think about it. I'll tell you more closely. You always told me your childhood story, how you didn't study well. You're always open to new knowledge. And now when I look at you from the outside, you're always open to new knowledge. So for me, what you're telling me right now, and the question I asked you, is that your perception of the world has changed so drastically, not just the volume of knowledge. So you're open. Like, wow, cool, let's try this, that, and that. And a lot of people are even afraid to try a new product in the store to cook something. It's just a regular recipe. We're walking along the beaten path. And then you're like, well, you didn't study. And then it's like, and that's it.
Since I was 18, I read a lot of books about business by Robert Kiyosaki, Brian Tracy, and so on. But I had theoretical knowledge.
I just couldn't accept it. What's the first book you remember?
Sorry for interrupting you. You read it and you're like, wow, cool, I want to go there. It really flipped your mindset. The first book I read that got me started on reading more was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read it.
Another book that I read here in America, and it was such a great boost and idea for me, is The Richest Man in Babylon. This is for business because Kiyosaki is more about motivation. The Richest Man in Babylon is more about business and the principles of how business works. Because in reality, they are the same all over the world and they don't change. So it's a really great book about principles, about business, that money exists, and there's plenty of it. You just need the right tools to make it happen. It's very hard to get through. For example, I'm currently going through a stage where I'm learning to delegate. Because everyone says, you need to delegate your responsibilities. Delegation, delegation. Everyone talks about it a lot. But saying it and doing it and actually doing it is very hard. So the person I was 10 years ago and who I am now are absolutely two different people.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the interview.
Very nice indeed it is.